Hey everybody, it's Nick. This week the group got back together and did some good old-fashioned cultist hunting with their old buddy Travis, but not before getting up to some nefarious deeds of their own. But first, when last we left our heroes, our group of intrepid adventurers had ousted some lizard folk from a castle, and they have just recently learned that the lizard folk are planning on taking it back. The lizard folk are raising an army to go and storm the castle and retake it from the heroes. The heroes are raising armies of their own to go and do war and everything. So they are in the middle of a recruiting campaign, and while they're in the city of Volta doing errands as well as recruiting, Travis ate some mind-altering substances and then shot and killed a random bar patron who was magically saved by Callister, so he didn't actually die.
You're not dead.
No. He shot me.
But as a natural result of shooting someone, attempted murder, Travis got taken off to jail. These things happen. While in custody, Travis managed to make a deal for his freedom in exchange for eradicating some secret cult or organization that was operating under the sewers in the city of Volta. And so he had managed to negotiate for his freedom if he was able to discover and eliminate this cult. However, we picked up this session right at the moment of the arrest, so Travis was still was a few hours forward in what he knew was going to happen, but the rest of the players had not learned any of that information yet, so we picked it up right there with Travis, and he's getting arrested, and they're sort of negotiating, trying to figure out what's going to happen to him, and they follow him to the prison, and they ask some guards, and ask around, and they figure out that it is going to take Travis a couple of weeks in custody before he will see a magister. That is what they are told. And so they go, okay, great, we have to do something else for a few weeks to bide our time. We're going to wait until Travis knows more about his situation. He'll know more in the morning, probably after he's talked to somebody, so maybe that will help the situation. First, then, they check in with their castle. They use sending to communicate back to their castle, say, hey, can you send some scouts forward to see when are the lizard folk coming? Do we have a few weeks that we can waste here in the city of Volta? And they get back from the scouts sometime between a few weeks and a few months, maybe 3 weeks to 2 months, somewhere in there. The scouts are mostly guessing, but based on the sizes of the army and the preparedness and everything, that's the estimation they're making. So the players go, okay, well, it's going to take us a couple days to get back to our castle from this city. I guess we have to risk it and wait for Travis. So that is what they're planning on doing. They're going to hang out and wait for their buddy Travis and see if they can learn any more information about him and his situation before acting further. But while they're waiting, they figure we might as well try to deliver this letter we have. And so, you know, the letter that they opened up, the secret letter that they weren't supposed to open, but inside it contained secret recon intel on the various demographics and the ease of invasion of all the islands and their tribes and everything. Well, they opened it up and read it, and then they made a forged copy of it, and then they tried to deliver that forged copy to the bartender. And as they did so, they'd sort of forgotten the passphrase that they needed to give to the bartender in order to let them know like who it was from. But the bartender took the letter anyway and just made no acknowledgement of what they were doing. They were like, okay, I guess we don't get a second reward, which they don't. But they managed to keep an eye on the bartender and say, what's he do with the letter? Does he just hang out? Does he wait? And after a while of watching him, it seemed like the bartender talked to a young serving boy for a little while, and it looked like maybe he handed him something. So the players have very high perceptions, and so they said, okay, well, let's follow this boy and see, because the boy left the tavern after that, and they said, okay, let's follow this boy and see where he goes. And so it's late in the evening, and it's middle of the night, basically, and they follow this young serving boy through the streets, and he eventually arrives at this house, and goes in for a little while, stays, and then leaves and goes away. And they say, let's stay at the house. We're going to stay at the house. We're going to forget the boy. Let's stay here and figure out what this place is. Maybe if we know what this place is, we'll have more information about the letter and this whole thing going on, and we'll be able to figure it out from there. After several failed spying attempts and scouting and looking around, Callister just turned himself into a fly with polymorph. And I feel like that's an exceptionally good use of the polymorph spell that never gets used. Spying and scouting are really good uses that I don't see used that much. People always want to turn into like T-Rexes and stuff, but they don't think about, well, what if I turn into like a flea and followed somebody, and who looks for a fly. So that is what he did. He snuck into the open window very easily, and on the second floor just flew up there and got in. And inside he found like a study and was listening, and there was a woman in there who seemed to be talking and relaying information found in this letter that they had delivered, but they weren't relaying it to anyone. They must have been having a conversation with somebody not in the room magically. And through his scouting, he realized and discovered that this was the person that they suspected it might be. This was Gloria, whom they had been feeding information to about the demographics of the various tribes and islands. And so they were confirmed in their suspicions that Gloria was probably some sort of a spy for some faction, organization, or even nation that was at very least collecting demographic information, but probably planning some sort of invasion or attack on this region. And they left and they convened together and said, okay, what can we do about this? We know this is a big thing coming, but at the end of the day, they just decided we have bigger fish to fry. We have more immediate problems and that are more pressing to us right now that we're going to not deal with this whole invasion spy thing, and we're going to deal with our own stuff first. In the morning, they got some surprise news from Travis. He had already seen a magister. They thought it was going to take a few weeks, but in seeing this magister, he had made a deal for his freedom with just one stipulation, one condition, and he needed to meet with them in person to tell them what this condition was. So the group all met up together, and Travis is with them, and he says, I need to go and find this secret cult that is operating in the sewers underneath the city of Volta. If I try to leave or stall, then there's a spell that's been placed on me that will kill me or drive me insane. I need your help. Will you do this with me? And the party agreed, and so they then began setting out, figuring out how are we going to discover who this cult is. And so they took the information that they knew. They knew that there were several subsystems or various systems underneath the city of Volta. They knew about tombs and catacombs under the temple. They knew about the new sewer system that had been built recently by the rich adventurers who had come in, and they knew about the old sewer system that was not in use anymore. It was much deeper, and this is where the cult had been operating. They were suspected to be operating in the deep old sewer system, and they need to figure out how do we get down there to go and fight the cult. And so they learned some rumors that maybe some of the really old catacombs deep down had some sort of a connection or breach possibly into the old sewer system. So they went to the temples and they said, hey, can we go wander around your catacombs? To which the temple priest said, absolutely not. They're not a tourist attraction. And the players then explained what they were doing, what they're about, and they were like, okay, well, you can go wander around, look, not touch, if we send someone with you. The players agreed, and then eventually, after wandering, exploration, some clever tricks by them, they managed to discover a breach, a hidden breach into the old sewer system from deep in the catacombs under one of the temples. So they entered the breach, of course, and then with no real plan, they just sort of quietly wandered around the sewer system for a long time. It was like a drainage sewer system. It was hours and hours of just wandering down there until finally they saw a glow up ahead of them and heard the murmur of voices. They found a break in the tunnel wall, and as they peeked around the corner after extinguishing all their flames and their light sources, they saw several individuals standing around seeming on guard. They had robes on and morning stars, and they all had a symbol on their robes, this symbol. And they seemed to be standing in front of some circular-shaped doorway. And the players sort of stepped back and realized, okay, these are probably guards, and there's something beyond that door. We need to figure out what it is, but we need to make sure that the guards don't alert anyone on the other side of the door. So what they had Callister do is he cast silence. At the beginning of combat, he had the silence sphere up and made sure nobody was able to make any sound, and the players rushed in and beat the crap out of these guards here. And it was actually very interesting narrating a completely silent battle as people are punching and shooting spells and taking damage and wincing and experiencing pain with no sound whatsoever happening. It was a very surreal and strange experience for the players, and I made sure to narrate it as such. They managed to capture one of the guards alive, and that made the riddle that I had on the door way easier because they were able to get that information out of the guard in exchange for letting him go. And so they solved the riddle, the doors opened, and on the other side they saw several other mages and combat began once again after the players jumped into the room. And so Tico rushes forward into the room to do his monk thing. He's been awesome in these last few combats where he's able to just run in there and stun people and move really fast and get to the back lines. Monks are really good under the right circumstances, and he has been very effective in combat lately. So great job, Tico. But before the rest of the party could act, an Umber Hulk burrowed up out of the ground in front of the players and blocked their approach. Now here's where I made a mistake as a DM. They were fighting an Umber Hulk, and an Umber Hulk has the ability to, if you start your turn within 30 feet of them and they can see you, force you to make a charisma saving throw. If you fail, then you lose your turn or worse. As a part of this ability, you can avert your gaze and choose not to make the saving throw, but also do everything else at disadvantage, but take your turn as normally otherwise. However, I feel like DMs often tell players about this averting your gaze thing, but I failed to mention that to my players. That was the mistake that I made, and it made the combat a lot harder. I don't know, what do you folks usually do for these averting your gaze type things? Do the players ask, can I avert my gaze? Or do you tell them, hey, as a part of this, you can choose not to look at it? I did make sure to describe that there was these little eyes set in the carapace of the Umber Hulk, and they radiated this energy and all of that. So maybe the players could have thought to avert their gaze, but nobody ever asked about it, and I didn't read far enough in the ability to get to that part. So I didn't give them the option, basically. So do you folks usually tell players that they have that option, especially new players, or do you just let the players come up with it, and if they don't, too bad? What do you guys do? Let me know in the comments because I'm curious. I plan on admitting my mistake. I usually try to let them know, hey, at least you have this option if you want it. And I plan on starting up next session with, hey, sorry guys, you should have been able to avert your gaze and I didn't let you know that that was possible. Maybe try stuff like that in the future, and if I forget, then you can bring it up after the fact. But I am a human, I am a DM, but I am learning, and so all the time I make mistakes, but I think it's good to own up to players when you do make a mistake and let them know, hey, sorry about that, we'll fix it moving forward. Nobody died as a result, so I don't feel the need to retcon anything. I'll just play the ball where it lies, basically, but I do want to let my players know what happened, at least on my end of the situation, because that fight did feel a lot harder than I expected it to, because it was like a DC 15 charisma save, and for most of my players, that was nigh impossible for them to make. And so there were 3 players trapped by this, and about 1 per round got to do something as a result. And then one of those players went down, the one who was good at charisma saves, so he went unconscious. And then there was only 2 players, and they had low charisma saves. So it was this very weird death spiral thing that ended up happening. And in the meanwhile, Tico is running around crazy in the back with like 5 monks, and he's doing work on them. And eventually he managed to take down the head cultist, and the head cultist sort of has this speech about, they're the cult of the Leviathan, and the actions that the party is taking will only hasten the return of the Leviathan to revenge his cult. And he's like, whatever, man, and just kind of beats this guy to a pulp. And in the head cultist sort of dying move, he casts heal on the Umber Hulk. And that made it a way harder fight, and was really neat to have that happen. So this Umber Hulk, instead of having like 90 hit points, has like 160 hit points, and it was a long fight for them to grind through to get that Umber Hulk down. And it was tough because, again, the averting their gaze thing. But they did manage to crack it eventually, and nobody died, and they defeated the cultists. And right as this battle ends, 1 cultist managed to escape into another room out the back door, basically. And so the next session will pick up with them trying to figure out where did he go and recapture him and loot all the bodies. And then they need to provide proof to the Magister that they have actually defeated the cultists and all that. I don't know what they'll do next after that. They'll probably do some more recruiting and then go back to their stronghold at some point. They may have a conversation about the Codex Incabulum as a way to get some more quick allies, but at what cost? At what risk? So I think that'll be kind of neat. I'm also trying something that I've never tried before in next session. I'm going to do something where I move the camera. Normally the camera just follows the players, right? Follows the characters and shows only and exactly what they do. Well, I'm going to basically move the perspective of the camera to show the players something that the characters wouldn't and couldn't know. And I have no idea if that is a good idea or not, but I think it'll be interesting and dramatic, and I kind of want to do that to set up this final fight that's going to happen. And that's where we're basically going to go over to the lizard folk army and pan over the army to give them a sense of the scale, puns, of the size of this army, the battle that's about to come, but also to dramatically reveal who the leader of this army is and why that should be scary or important or relevant. And so I'm very excited to try something out. I always like experimenting as a DM, so we'll see how that goes. I don't know. But basically, that's what we're going to try to do next time, and that's what I'm predicting. Who knows, though? Players can always throw things for a loop. But thank you folks for watching, and I'll see you next time.